Hey, what's up, dog? We're gonna learn how to hand stitch using a sewing awl. Threading, just like a machine, has two threads. It has a front stitch and a back stitch. Today, our front stitch is gonna be orange, our back stitch is gonna be blue. They are opposite colors. That way, hopefully, you can see them easier on screen. So we're gonna start with our back stitch first. Step one, get almost the entire back stitch thread inside the cup sole. Now, when you are working, you will only have access to inside of the shoe right here. When I demonstrate this, I'm going to take that access in mind. So you're going to take your bonded nylon thread or your waxed thread, whichever you prefer, thread it into the needle eye, and then pull it down to the length, about the length of the stitching awl, and then hold this short side with your thumb. Now you're going to go ahead into a factory hole in the heel. Go ahead and pokey poke. Okay, so the stitching awl is in there, but I only have access to right here. It might be dark if it's, a high ankle. One thing I always do is I pull it at halfway and you see it created a little loop. That way my hands are in here and I can kind of feel. Now what I want to do for the back stitch on this first one is I want the long end of this thread to be inside of the cup outsole and that 6 inches or so to be sticking out of the back. Okay, so when I'm in here, I can't see it, but I can feel. I'm gonna pull on one side and I'm gonna say, oh, okay, that's where my thumb is holding down the thread. That's the short side. That's not the side I want. So then I'll go to the other side and I'll start pulling. And I'm gonna get the entire length into the cup outsole. And now I have to pull it out of the eye here, the entire length once again. Now I'm going to hold on to the thread on the inside when I pull my stitching awl out. That way, no funny business over here. And this is what it should look like inside your cup outsole. You have the entirety of the thread in here with just about 6 inches or so sticking out. Now we're ready for our front stitch. The front stitch is the thread that people can see. So typically if you're doing a sole swap, reglue, whatever, it's the color that matters. The back stitch color does not matter. We're going to go ahead and thread the needle through the eye again. About the length of the stitching awl on one side and the rest of it on the other side. Holding it with my thumb again, I'm going to stick into the next factory hole from what I did the back stitch. So I'm sticking it in, then I'm pulling it out halfway just so I have that loop so I can feel. Now this time for the front stitch, I want the short end inside the cup sole. So I'm going to do my little tugging here. Okay, I tugged this side as I'm feeling, and I can see that that was the long side. That's not the side that I want. So I'm going to tug here. I know that's the short side where my thumb is. I'm going to let go of my thumb and I'm going to go ahead and pull the short end of the thread inside. Now I'm going to hold it here while I pull the stitching awl out. Boop! Okay, that's what it should look like here. Now the next step, give yourself a little bit of slack on one side. Little loop just like that. And then go ahead and poke it into the next factory hole. Pull halfway. You have your little loop again. You're going to pull on that short side. The short side now is going to be your first actual stitch. I'll try to show you here on this camera. I'm pulling on the short side. You're going to see that familiar stitch form there. Okay, now I have this loop here. Try to remember this or else it'll get kind of tangled up. I'm going counterclockwise, so I always want my loop on this side of my needle eye. That way when I pull it out, I'm not pulling the loop with it. I'm just pulling the rest of the thread. So I have my loop on this side of the needle, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull the back stitch through it. The whole entire back stitch. Just pull it through. Once it's pulled, I'm going to pull my stitching awl and then pull the thread to tighten it up. There's the back stitch, and it is keeping the front stitch from leaving that hole. That is my first thread that you can see, that your customer, you, whoever, can see. Now I'm going to make the next one. Make sure that I have a little bit of slack on this side of my needle since I'm going counterclockwise. I'm going to go ahead, stick it into the next factory hole. I'm going to pull it out about halfway. I'm going to feel for the side, the short side, and I'm going to pull it taut. And as you can see on this camera here, I'm making the next thread that you can see. The loop is on this side of my needle. I'm going to pull the back stitch through. I'm going to hold on to that loop and pull out the stitching awl. Then I'm going to tighten it, and now I have 2 threads. And this is it, over and over and over. So I'm just going to start doing this until we get to the difficult part here. Loop on this side. Poke, pull halfway. Tighten. We got our third stitch here. Pull the back stitch through. Hold my loop, pull the stitching awl. Tighten the thread. Boom. One thing I should mention when you're doing this, do not pull too hard. If you pull too hard, the back stitch will pop out of the front. You can see on this camera, you can see the blue there. You don't want to see the blue, your customers don't want to see the blue. Just make sure you pull it back through so it's nice and even. Give yourself a pull on both sides so there's an even tension between both. Basically what a sewing machine does, it tries to provide even tension to make this thread possible. Loop on this side. Factory hole, pull halfway, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold on to loop, pull out stitching awl, pull thread taut, slack on this side. Poke through factory hole, pull out halfway, pull taut, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold loop, pull stitching awl out, and pull front stitch taut. Slack on this side. Poke through factory hole, pull out halfway, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold on the loop, pull stitching awl, pull thread taut, leave slack on this side of needle, poke through factory hole, pull halfway, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold loop, pull stitching awl, pull thread taut, leave slack on this side of needle, poke through next factory hole, pull halfway, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold loop, pull stitching awl, pull thread taut. Just want to show you what we've accomplished so far. Here on this camera you can see half of that heel is done. And on this camera you can see a nice straight line where the back stitch is doing its job. And then just keep doing this over and over and over. Slack on this side. Poke through factory hole. Pull halfway. Pull short side taut. Pull back stitch through loop. Hold loop. Pull stitching awl. Pull thread taut. I'm going to keep going here. Okay, now probably for the most part you could see inside of the shoe when you took your hand out these threads here. But this starts to get to the point where you need to feel. This is why I like to start from the back. But once you start getting here, you're going to notice that you have to kind of look in this way to see if you can see the threads. So this is when your feel is basically going to be the whole shebang-a-bang. Now, don't be afraid to make big loops if you have to. That way you can feel for things. Pull halfway, pull taut. I gave myself a bigger loop on this side so that I have a bigger loop on the inside. That way I don't have to worry about looking for it. I know it's there. And then all I have to do is feel around for the back stitch. Once I feel the thread, I put it in both my fingers and then pull through. This is a very big loop, but I mean it's only there, it's only big because we need it to be sometimes when we have bigger fingers, bigger hands. Hold on to your loop. Pull stitching all through, it's the same thing. Pull thread taut. So your hand's going to be in more like this. Give yourself a nice bigger loop. Poke through, pull that halfway. Get that bigger loop towards you. And by the way, it looks like I pulled my pass thread out a little bit. It's not a big deal. When I go pull for taut the next time, everything should line up. Pull back stitch through. See, once I have it and I'm in here, I'm just going to take my hand out of the shoe. And then typically, from now on, the back stitch is just going to be hanging outside of the shoe. Like this. Okay? I'm always going to be able to at least see it. Then I hold my loop, pull my stitching awl, and pull the thread taut. See that loop right there? As long as I'm pulling this nice and tight, I can go ahead and tighten that loop up and then tighten this loop up. No big deal. Always make sure that you're pulling your back stitch from underneath your loop. So right now, if I couldn't see this and I felt this here, I felt my back stitch, I might pull it, and then when I do everything, I'll pull this taut and it's just going to pop right out because it didn't hook on to anything, and I'll know, oh, I didn't actually pull the back stitch through. It must have been in another spot. Now it looks like I skipped a hole. When I was doing that little demonstration, I just went right to the next hole. Alright, well, no big deal. Make sure I pull my back stitch out so I can go back one. Once you start doing this enough, it's going to be more of a fluid motion. It's not going to be, you know, each step that I'm explaining. Loop, stick, pull short side taut. pull back stitch through the loop, hold loop, pull stitching all, pull thread taut. It's going to be more and more natural the more you do it. It's going to get more and more challenging once you get to this front area because it's all encapsulated. Your hand is just going to be in there and it's all going to be feel. Even with the laces off and the tongue pulled this way, it's still going to be pitch dark in here. It's going to be all by feel. Okay, once we start getting into this toe area, since you're pulling these threads taut, just go ahead and hold that long end of the back stitch outside of the shoe and pull outside here. That way you don't have to worry about fishing around in there. Even though you're going to be a lot further away, no big deal. Not only does it get more challenging because you can't see up here, typically the stitches are closer together. So you actually have a little bit more work up here. When I cut the length for this thread, I just took a piece and brought it around like this, and then in here, and then I cut it. If we end up being short, it's not that big of a deal. Essentially what happens if you end up running out of one of these threads is you just have to do these first steps here all over again. You just have to do them in the spot where you left off. So let's say I ran out of backstitch here, I would have to put the rest of my new backstitch in this area, have a little bit hanging out here, and then continue. I think I may run out of this front stitch here, which is great because then I can show you what I mean about how to start again. Yeah, we're getting pretty short here on the front stitch. Now, since I'm going to be running out of this front stitch, what I like to do is leave enough thread so that I can glue it down back here on this side with all the other threads that I'm going to glue down at the end. And we're almost there. I'm going to do like maybe 3 or 4 more threads and then I'm going to call it a day on this piece. I'm about there. So the front stitch looks like I cut a little too short because it's not going to make its way all the way around. So what I will do with my last thread of this stitch, go as normal, put this end in here, pull short side taut, pull back stitch through loop, hold on to loop, pull out stitching awl, but then I'm just going to let it go. Stitching awl is going to get off of that thread there, and with this loop I'm just going to pull that end into the cup outsole all the way through. So it's nice and clean. Now here's that end here. When I glue down, all of the threads will be present there. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab another piece of thread. I'm going to grab a different color, that way you can kind of see how seamless this is going to look. You wouldn't be able to tell on the outside unless I grabbed a different color, so just for demonstration purposes that's what I'll do. I'll grab this Volt green here. Hopefully it'll show up well on camera. When I'm pulling out my length, obviously maybe I wasn't thinking or I didn't pull out enough, but so top to bottom, 1, 2, 3, let's say 4. That's plenty. It's way more than I need probably, but just in case. Grab your snips. Okay, I have my new piece of thread. I'm going to do the same exact thing I did with the front stitch in this heel area, which if you remember, I put the short side inside and I kept the long side out. That's exactly what I'm going to do here. But this time I'm going to make sure that my short side is long enough to get to the back of the heel when I'm gluing down. So it's going to be about that long there. So I'm going to hold where I want it to go in, right about there. I'm going to put my thumb right over the stitching awl here. Where this thread ended here, that's where I'm putting in my new thread. Thumb over the thread, stick it in the last hole that the orange one was in, pull halfway, and I'm going to find the short side. This is my short side here, and I'm going to pull the short side all the way through. Here, that should be long enough to go to the heel here when I'm gluing down, and it is very nice. Now hold on to it when I pull my stitching awl out, and it's the same thing, baby. Slack on that side, poke halfway. Now the challenge here would be, because see all these threads here, how do I know which one is mine? Well, if I was leaving my back stitch on the outside of the shoe, I could just give it a tug as I'm feeling here, and I'll be like, okay, the tug. Okay, there it is. All right, I feel it now, and then I'll pull it through. Slack on my side, poke, pull halfway, pull taut, back stitch, do the loop, hold the loop, pull the stitching awl, then pull, thread, taut. See, it's as if I didn't run out of thread. It's the same thing. And from the outside, it's going to look exactly the same. Even when using machines, this can happen. You can't see the bobbin, which is the back thread, because the shoe is covering it. Once you run out, you know, you don't know where you're going to be on that shoe, but it's going to be the same, pretty much the same thing, where you're going to have a cup outsole that's going to have like 3 or 4 threads in it versus 1 or 2. All that means is that a thread ran out and they had to start with a new one. I know some of you are watching this video cursing me out at this area right here, and I'm sorry. What I will say is I don't love it either, and that's why I bought the $300 hand crank sewing machine. It saves me so much time doing this. It's incredible. If you're watching this on the reglue video, it's going to be the next chapter. It's also a standalone video that you can see in the top right here. It's the best $300 and change I ever spent on my business of restoration. Purists don't like it. Purists like doing it like this, and that is totally fine. Me, I just want to be more productive, and being more productive means being faster, doing something that's very repetitive like this. You may notice that I'm doing some steps kind of out of step of what I had mentioned before. You know, I might be pulling the stitching all out first and then pulling the back stitch through. Totally fine to do that if it's easier for you. Once you get in a groove, it's going to be more like one motion. And I'm sure you've noticed by now, since I'm going counterclockwise, this loop here is always on my side, and this loop here is always on my side. If you want to go clockwise, that's fine. It might be easier for some. It might be easier for some left-handers. Just make sure that you have your loop going the right way. I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you don't, okay? Let's say I put my loop on this side, right? And I start trying to pull this out. I'm stuck. I'm stuck on my small thread there. Okay, because I pulled it off the wrong side. And basically being stuck on the small thread here, you wasted some time, you might get frustrated. So just try to avoid that by pulling your slack on the correct side of the needle. I'm going counterclockwise, so it's towards me. Not only purists, but some people just love doing this. It's something that they can do and chill, listen to music, watch TV, whatever. One of those kind of mundane tasks where it's just the same kind of thing over and over and over, but you are creating something. And creating something is what it's all about. Home stretch here, getting towards the end. Kind of cheating a little bit using this hand. I just don't want to make this video too long and painful for you. I think by now you got the idea, but you're probably wondering, how does it all end? Well, we're almost there and I can show you. But basically, you want all of those ends to be in the back there for nice clean work. Then you're going to want to cut your threads so they're all kind of uniform. You want to look like you took some pride in your work. Alright, are we there yet? A few more. I'm going to go into this hole where the end of my back stitch is, and then thread as normal, and then finish here in the very first hole that I did at the beginning of this little project. Alright, this is where I'm finishing. I'm finishing where I started. Very first stitch hole, factory stitch hole that I did. Poking through there. Pull halfway. Pull the short side taut. And then just pull the long side all the way through. Now you can pull your stitching all out. Should be clean. What you should have here is your start and finish of your front stitch, which typically would be the same color, but since we ran out of the front stitch we have two colors, but that's the beginning and the end. And then we have one end of our back stitch here. And the only thing we have to do to get that other end of the back stitch, you can try to use your fingers, or I like to use one of my hook tools. Link in the description below for the hook tools. Okay, so I take one of my trusty hook tools and I find the hole that the end of my back stitch is coming out of. I go on the inside and I just pull it through. Okay, so that's what it should look like. We have our in and out front stitch and then our beginning and end of our back stitch. But since we actually ran out of the front stitch over on this side, we're gonna have two more ends over here. I wanna bring them over to the heel area. I like nice clean work, so this is why I do this. Essentially they're all together here, right? And I want them to be more or less the same length. I'm gonna go ahead, maybe I'll trim this one a little bit because I just want it to lay on the bed here, not lean on the heel. Okay, get rid of that. And then these four here, which is typically what you're gonna have, I like to lay them down like here, but I like to be able to see the end when I take out the insole. That way the next time I need to thread, I know where they are. And then I'll just go ahead and cut them all the same length. Then when I'm ready to glue down underneath the insole, everything is nice and neat right here. Just one strip of cement glue, rubber cement glue, whatever, right down there, just to hold them down. And that's it. There's our back stitch line right there. Right about here, we ran out of front stitch and then I started a new one. And then just to show you how seamless that is, I did make it two different colors just to demonstrate that it is two separate threads. If it was the same color, you would have never known. This is not anything that's atypical. You run out of thread when you're sewing. It happens. There's our start and end. Thank you for tuning in to Papi Chulo. Now get stitching. Get stitching. Peace.